So yeah, these game publishers claim the 100% crash rate with Intel CPUs. Alderon Games says company sells defective 13th and 14th gen chips. So, I mean, just from my perspective, and I know Diet's going to provide some more insight since he's back from vacation, but this part of like no BIOS or firmware update can fix the problem. And I guess the question.
Yeah, that's rough.
So I guess the question I kind of had the other day when I first saw that was, is that they can't fix the failures from happening, or does that mean the no BIOS firmware update cannot fix the problem of the ones that are already damaged? Like, it makes sense you can't like repair the ones that are already damaged, but like if you go,
let's kind of back it up.
Okay.
Part of the issue is that it's not one symptom that's manifesting in a specific way that people can point at and be like, that's the thing. It's a variety of symptoms that are all manifesting in different ways. And Intel has, at first, when it was first brought up, they pushed it back on the motherboard manufacturers after 5 months of silence and said put out a BIOS update. Motherboard manufacturers did. The BIOS update did not correct the issue. They are coming out. They finally acknowledged it in a statement.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming out with another BIOS update, which will include a microcode fix. And microcode is code that's actually stored on the processor itself.
Right.
Way back in the Pentium 4 days, there was a specific exploit that was hardware, and there was no way to fix it. So they came up with this whole microcode system. So now there's a very small amount of code that's stored on the processor itself nowadays.
Right.
And so it's going to take patching that code to potentially fix the issue. But if you've already been affected, your chip's just damaged and it's permanently damaged, and they say, oh, contact Intel for an RMA, but they haven't given us any guidelines as to what specifically qualifies for an RMA. Who to contact specifically. Like their lower level customer service reps are not going to know anything about this. And you've got large corporate people like Dell that are saying, hey, we've sold all these systems, right? What if Dell's customers start coming back to them and being like, well, I need a new system.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because their chips could be permanently damaged. And now I just recently read that Intel stated that the issue is affecting all chips that are 65 watt TDP or higher. So at first it was just the high-end SKUs like the i7s and i9s.
Right.
65 watts is basically 90% of the desktop chip stack.
Okay.
I mean, maybe Core i3, lower level models of it.
Right.
Would not be affected, but like
what about the i5s? Any of the i5s?
Yeah, so there's i3 is the lowest level chip, i9 is the highest level chip.
Right.
So all the i5s are affected.
All of them.
All the i7s, all the i9s.
Jesus. Damn.
For both 13th and 14th gen.
Mm-hmm.
So far, it doesn't seem to be like it's in any 12th gen stuff, but they, when we first found out about it, we were saying, oh, it's all the 14th gen i9 processors. And then the more data has come out, the more it's been, no, it's also 13th gen, but it's only the high end. Okay, no, now it's actually low end too. It's more like game developers are using their hooks in people's systems to find out what is causing this issue, and they're even putting pop-ups in the game now. If the game crashes and the next time you launch it, it'll say, hey, just so you know, this wasn't our game. You're affected by the Intel bug.
They're going to leave that in the game forever. EA's just going to permanently leave that message.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's specifically if they identify the hardware of like an Intel 13th gen or 14th gen is a
Jeez, man.
desktop chip. Maybe some of the ultra power efficiency stuff isn't affected, but then the new news that just came out like this week, as of the last 24 or 48 hours, is that their laptop chips are also being affected. So it's not just the desktop chips,
So
but
it's
it's
the
also the
mobile stuff
laptop
also.
chips.
Wow.
And Intel hasn't confirmed this yet, but they said that it's not the same thing. It's a different bug, but they haven't really given us a way to identify the first bug yet. So I don't know that they even know what the first bug is, and if they can't clearly identify the first bug, how are they going to be able to differentiate that with a different bug and say it's not the same thing if it's manifesting on all these crazy ways?
Right.
Um,
Oh, hold on just a second. What's up, Taco Man? Just got Diet here in the party chat. We're talking about the Intel chip issue, but it's been a while. Glad you're here. So then, okay, so if this is affecting two different generations of chips, I guess my question is, I know you told me that it started in the consumer space, and then now that it's spilled over into like servers, that it's starting to get a lot more attention. Like because businesses are now making decisions, right? You got devs that are now calling out the bullshit, but why is it affecting two gen of chips? Like, why did it take to the second generation of chips here? Did they not make server chips with the 13th
so
gen,
it's
or
it's
what's
actually the fourth generation. So
fourth gen?
12th gen, 13th gen, 12th
Oh,
gen, 13th gen, and 14th gen are all the same processor architecture.
okay,
They all share the same socket, and 13th gen is kind of like an evolution of 12th gen, and 14th gen is just like a step up or a efficiency um, reconfiguration on the 13th gen.
okay,
So basically, like the when it first came out, the 13th gen i9 was saying, oh, it's 30% more powerful than the 12th gen i9. And then the 14th gen was something like 5 to 10% more powerful than that. So it's a significant step up from 12th gen, but also this instability is affecting all the chips. There's either the same or different instability on the laptop side of the issue, and the um, if you look at the market share, right?
mm-hmm,
Like I'd say 70% of the chips sold in desktops are Intel,
right,
and in the laptop space, like good 90% are Intel. AMD is kind of, I don't want to say they stopped competing, but you can't easily find AMD chips from the major manufacturers. Like their selection is very limited, and most of their selection is Intel and NVIDIA combos in the laptop space. And I bought my daughter a laptop for college, and I specifically um, went away from a Copilot PC because I didn't want her to have the AI. Because the newest stuff, the newest generation of stuff has dedicated AI compute units on the processor. And I didn't want that in case, for whatever reason, AI just turned out to be really bad.
okay,
So I was like, well, we'll get her a 13th gen laptop. We'll get her a Core i5. Laptops aren't supposed to be affected. Core i5s aren't supposed to be affected. This is going to be a solid laptop for her for college. And I just bought it a couple of months ago. And now I'm like, crap. This thing's a ticking time bomb.
that sucks. So
So,
so I guess then
so yeah.
so then I guess my question to you would be, like, if you're looking to build a PC or get or build or buy a PC, like what are you looking out for then?
Well, first off, my Intel 12th gen chips that I have for both me and my wife,
Mm-hmm.
I bought the 12th gen and I had found out through leaks that 13th gen and 14th gen were going to share the same socket. And so the plan at the time of building our PCs back in 2021
Right, I remember
was
that.
to wait till 15th gen came out and then I buy the 14th gen chips at a
At
discount.
discount. But now they're all
15th
shit.
gen. Yeah, 15th gen hasn't quite come out yet.
Right.
But the 14th gen chips, I'm just going, well, that whole upgrade path is now aborted.
Yeah.
Like it's just gone.
So
And anything new I'm building with an AMD chip. End of story.
okay. So you're just straight like AMD. Like if you go in and to build out a PC from a manufacturer, you're just like select the AMD processor button, and that way you're not worrying about any Intel buggy
Yep, I'm not
bullshit.
affected by it at all.
Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
because if you think about it, right, like there's a lot of people like me where when Intel 8th generation or so, the Ryzen processors were kind of a little bit subpar to or equal to the Intel stuff. And by the time 12th generation with Intel came around, like AMD had a little bit of a performance lead, but I was like, well, I've had Intel for 20 years. I like Intel. They're stable. Nobody's ever gotten fired for buying an Intel server as opposed to an AMD server that performs like crap, right? And Intel's good. I like Intel. I like NVIDIA. I was building PCs with Intel and NVIDIA, and this has been enough of an issue to break brand loyalty for me.
Wow.
And
I mean,
and
yeah.
for people in the know who are in the building space, if they haven't already done that, they just don't know about the issue. Like all the tech reviewer channels are saying, yeah, we're just not recommending Intel for anything. We're going to give you the performance benchmarks, but we can't even really tell you what the performance is because the new microcode fix coming out August 15th may totally kill the performance. Because part of the issue was that motherboard manufacturers up to this point were juicing the voltages on the chip to give it better performances. And then Intel came back and said, no, 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 you weren't supposed to do that. Bad boys. Slapped them on the wrist. But it was always part of the Intel architecture.
Give it to me, Daddy.
Yeah, it was always part of the Intel architecture that as long as there was thermal headroom, meaning your cooling solution like your CPU fan or your AIO, as long as that was sufficient, it would take the voltage and it'd ramp the chip up and it'd keep it boosting longer. And so now, come to find out, that automatic voltage regulation this entire time was just screwed, and nobody ever told the consumer. So, yeah,
Wow.
tons of game servers, I won't say actual servers, but like game servers are affected. Tons of people who bought computers, basically anybody from like 2020 on is probably affected. And you look at like the scope of the issue, and there's a lot of people who won't even know that they hit this bug because they're just using their computer and they're like, oh, my computer's slow, it sucks. And what are they going to do? They're just going to buy a new one. So for business reasons, Intel can't afford a recall.
Oh yeah.
Right? For consumer trust reasons, their first strategy was to push it off on the motherboard manufacturers and say, not our problem. And now they've come back and said, well, it is our problem. Now that data has shown up saying that it's a processor issue.
Right.
So, yeah, consumer trust, man, in terms of that, the fact that they didn't take ownership of it right away is terrible. You know? It's like having another good example of that was a couple of years ago. There was a power supply issue with the NVIDIA cards where the connectors were just melting.
Right, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
GeForce. It caused a whole redesign of the power connector spec on power supplies because the cards were just melting, and they're still melting. Like it's still
that's still happening.
Yeah, because if you have an older power supply, anytime you plug and unplug the card, if the power supply gives it too much juice, or there's not enough resistance there, or if it's slightly unplugged or whatever. They don't know why exactly it's happening, but it's just melting the connector.
Yeah.
And so they're probably going to redesign the power supplies again when the NVIDIA 5000 series comes out.
Yeah. Well, I guess.
And yeah.
Well, then, okay. So the Intel thing, as far as like, could they? So they're gonna. So I think I saw something like they're gonna issue a patch, but it won't fix broken. Is
Right.
my
So
understanding?
if your
But
chip is
will it? But like, if your processor hasn't broken yet, will it prevent it from breaking? I guess that's the question.
yeah, so it's a prevention patch or mitigation patch. Like if your chip is already half fried, nothing's gonna resurrect it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But it will supposedly keep chips from being affected in the future. But let's say that cuts
But you don't
performance
even
by
know that. But
20%.
we won't even know that until.
Well, and you don't know until the patch is deployed and it's another couple months and we get more data.
Yeah.
So, like anybody looking to build now, it's like, why would you bank on the
Why?
unknown
Yeah. Why you
versus
doing
just switching to a different brand that's has no reliability issues
it? Yeah. Dang, that's
and
crazy.
has better performance?
And
So
they
if
have
you
better
think about,
performance. Wow.
yeah, so AMD has better performance, but if you think about like what it would take to mitigate this type of issue, right? And Intel, when all these chips were designed, were banking on motherboard manufacturers custom tuning the chips. So what if, in order to mitigate the issue,
Oh.
you deploy a microcode patch that kills the performance by 20%, and all of a sudden 14900Ks are performing worse than 12900Ks? That's not profitable.
No. No.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's
Intel
crazy.
is probably just going to issue a fix, ride it out like nothing's happening until 15th gen comes around. If a customer complains, they say, well, we've issued a fix.
So okay, so then my
And
question then 15 June. So this is affecting the 13, 14 mostly, some 12s.
right.
15 Gen, I'm assuming is probably right around the corner. Do you
Yeah,
think that they will have like those would be good? Do you think that they're going to be like, yeah, we need to make sure we get this freaking fix on these gens because if a month after those 15 gen comes out and people say these are still having a problem, like how bad would it be then? Because like that's the new manufacturing process that's about to come
so it's
out.
the new manufacturing process, but think about the cost that they've already invested in designing the new silicon, retooling all the fabs to manufacture that silicon. They've got to start recouping that cost already.
Yeah, but
Like
like
they've probably
if all your
sunk
customers
billions of
leave,
dollars.
like it won't work out in the long run. So it's like you gotta fix it. Like that. I mean,
Well,
that's
all their
just to me.
customers,
I don't know.
all their customers won't leave. It's the consumer side of it that's affected. They're still going to have the server business. They're still going to sell their Xeons, right?
But hold on. So what
Um,
servers? Then what servers are affected? Because this started gaming Steam from
the
servers.
dev, the dev game servers that are using consumer chips
Uh,
in workstation boards. They're not even server motherboards. They're like workstation boards.
okay.
But they're putting them in a server chassis and putting them in server racks so that because basically it's like a dedicated copy of the game that runs up in the server,
Is
right?
it is that
So
like a makeshift way to do servers?
yeah, so
Or is that
you can
like
turn
industry
any
standard? I guess is that industry standard for
it's
gaming?
industry standard for gaming.
Okay,
Like even the Xbox Cloud gaming service runs off of Xbox Series X's in a blade chassis in the data center.
okay.
The same hardware you have sitting on your desk is what's running in the cloud.
Mine is on wheels under my desk, but I get your point.
The in the game dev world, using consumer chips makes sense because they're just architected differently than like your server processors. You get higher single-threaded performance,
Mm-hmm.
and you get higher clock speeds in general. Whereas server chips are usually run at lower clock speeds but have way more cores. So like a server Intel Xeon chip may have 32 or 64 cores on it. I'm just making up numbers, but this has been a long time since I looked at the Xeon stuff. But it may have 64 cores but only run at 3 gigahertz. But a consumer grade Intel chip may run at like 4 gigahertz and have, you know, the 12 cores and 32 threads kind of thing.
Okay.
So you get better single-threaded performance out of consumer chips.
Okay. I get it. Yeah, man, it's just crazy because like you were hearing about it, it was like, cause, I mean, it started out like more of forum talk than anything else, and I remember you kind of telling me about that earlier in the year, kind of late last year, and then I guess the game devs started getting into the whole server hosting with them and stuff, and
because
it's where it kind of took off.
If you're watching the video, there's a channel called Level 1 Techs, and there's a guy named Wendell that hosts it. But he talks about the game servers, the kind of databases that he checked to find out this issue. But he also talked about how
I think it's this guy.
He also talked about how devs.
We all know that Intel.
Were getting shipped.
We all know that Intel's got a problem with the 3900K and the 40.
Yeah, it's that guy.
Yeah.
We're getting shipped racks of replacement chips, and his chips were just dying. They just swap them out in the data center. And that certain data centers were charging more if you're using Intel chips than if you're using AMD chips to run your game servers. So, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so if you can get comparable performance at a lower price because you're not getting a surcharge because it's an Intel product, as your chips are dying, why would you not just switch over to servers that are the other brand?
Right. And so then I guess the other question I have is, this is a software BIOS code issue. That is it overheating the chip and it's breaking something? You said it's like frying the chip partially?
So it is the BIOS on the motherboard, but there's also microcode that runs inside the processor itself.
Right.
So you'll get a BIOS update which contains the microcode, and then when the BIOS runs, when you power on the computer after updating it, it will update the microcode inside the processor.
Okay.
As far as it's not overheating, what it's doing is it's putting too much electricity through the chip. So the chip has different voltages for different things, like what the core voltage is, what the voltage on the memory channels are, and stuff like that. But it'll push those voltages to get you a better clock speed. And motherboard manufacturers have been doing it for years. And so the whole point with Wendell and Level 1 Techs was, hey, let's just take the overclocking people with enthusiast motherboards that are auto overclocking and they don't even know it. Let's just take that out of the equation. Let's look at some workstation boards with these chips in a data center that has never overclocked it. They all run standard configurations, and let's get the data from that, because those are more stable platforms and you're not going to get the voltages being pushed up by some algorithm running on your motherboard BIOS.
Okay, I'm going to check that. I'll check that video out later.
Yeah, but if you just think about the scope and scale of how much money Intel would lose if they had to replace every single chip that was manufactured.
Oh, yeah.
Or worst case scenario, they just reimburse the money as opposed to replacing the actual chip. Get a full refund on the chip, you know?
I mean, that's probably what I would wind up doing. Is like, send us your old chip. That way they can verify you had one. And they probably just give you like a warranty and reimbursement for a new chip. That's what.
Well, they can't do that because a lot of the chips that are affected are probably in pre-built Dells, right? And so you would be relying on an end user who's not technically savvy to pull a processor out. Like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Or if they're in a laptop, God forbid, that's not happening.
That is why you build your own PC.
So,
but I get it. Most people aren't going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. What do you think it's like working at being an IT professional at some of these companies right now?
specifically for the Intel issue,
Yeah.
it's probably just business as usual, man.
Really?
These data centers, these data centers, they want techs who are skilled, and they want people who aren't going to complain about the work. So they give them all kinds of crazy perks, man. When I visited a data center, I was working in a company called Aston Johnson, and we had some data center stuff that we were using, and every year we do the DR, the disaster recovery scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go up there to the data center, and I'd start running tests for our backup and restore processes, and we'd make notes every year as to what's changed and things like that. But I didn't ever go, but the guys who went were talking with the data center stuff, and they were like, the data center technicians said, like, oh yeah, we get all the free caffeine we want, we get free snacks, we get break, like, just really high quality of life type environment, because their job is so stressful that they don't want people to quit.
Yeah.
Because if you start thinking about the money aspects of the downtime of some of these servers,
Oh yeah.
like on a game server, it's not that big. But imagine you had some sort of Amazon server in the cloud that's processing all the financial data for all the new purchases. If that goes down for a minute, they're losing millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars.
That's why Bungie always fixes the store first.
So
there's an issue in the store, it's fixed in like 2 minutes, man.
So
It's fixed.
yeah,
so
it's
quick.
probably a pain in the ass to do the hardware repair on some of these servers.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And but by this point they've been doing it so long that they're used to it. So
Yeah.
they're like, okay, I got another ticket to swap out a processor. Let me go swap out another processor.
But you're swapping
this
it out
one
with
fried?
like
I don't-
one that's probably going to wind
A
up
fresh one, 'cause
frying as well.
Because Intel is sending them trays of this stuff, right? They're
Yeah.
sending the affected ones back to Intel. You know, maybe there's a goof in there somewhere, and like, oh, is this one of the ones I pulled, or is this a fresh one? I don't know. Let me just try it.
Yeah. It doesn't
'Cause,
matter,
I mean,
right? You just throw one in there. If it breaks or doesn't break, I mean, if it breaks, then we can
does
swap it
matter,
out. If it doesn't break, it's like, okay, whatever.
it does matter, because if you have to do it again, that's just more. You're just repeating your work, right? Like, you need to really keep track of it. But with quantity of chips that they're replacing, I would imagine that, yeah, sometimes that happens.
Jeez, man, that's crazy. Dude, I'm kind of
One
glad.
of
Like,
the-
I was gonna, cause I told you last year I was gonna be building my PC at the beginning of this year, and the only reason why I've kind of put it off is because I was kind of waiting on Civilization to kind of put out their specs, but for their PC specs, so I know what to kind of build for. But they're actually going to launch the game on consoles and PC. So I mean, I'm whatever, but it's like I'm kind of glad I didn't build a PC because I would be kind of pissed off if I had gone with an Intel chip. But I mean, now I know I'll just go to AMD anyways. But
another good reason to go with AMD is they have a tendency for really long-running sockets in the motherboards. So, like, you can have a AM4 socket motherboard, which was Ryzen 1000 series chips, all the way up to Ryzen 5000 series chips. But I think those AM4 sockets are like close to 10 years old.
damn.
And if you want a performance upgrade, you just pull the one chip out, you update the BIOS, and then put the new chip in, and it just works.
Damn.
Whereas Intel, in the past, they may have kept the same socket for like 2 generations. You come out with a new generation every year. Or they, like, with the 12th, 13th, and 14th gen, 3 years is the longest they've had one socket. And then with 15th gen, there's going to be a new socket. So you wanted to upgrade the processor, well, then that means you're buying a new motherboard, probably newer RAM. Whereas on the Ryzen side of it, a lot of that stuff is just interchangeable. So, like, if you get a AM5 motherboard, which is the newest stuff, it might be another 5-6 generations of Ryzen chips before you have to replace that board.
Damn. I think that alone.
So,
I think that alone, you just kind of convinced me to probably go with the AMD chip because being able, because I remember that always being. I mean, shit, it's been a while since I've even built a PC, but I remember that kind of always being like, if you swap out the PC or if you swap out the CPU, like you're probably swapping out the motherboard, and at that point in time, you might as well just do the whole damn thing new. You know, like your RAM, your hard drive.
Yeah.
You know, at that point in time, like once you get into swapping all that shit out, so it's like, okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, it kind of sucks. Anybody that's been building PCs here over the past, year and a half, 2 years? Jeez.
Yeah, when I built my 12900K system, I had a buddy that told me, no, you should just go AMD right now and get the Ryzen 7000 series. And I was like, no, I like Intel, and now I'm really kicking myself in the ass for it.
You're like, I don't know
Like,
if I'm going to make it.
Yeah, because now I'm just going to wind up buying another AM5 motherboard, getting another Ryzen processor, and being right back where I would have been 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'll probably turn around. I'll probably do something with this computer and, you know, make some of my money back off it or whatever. But
You can host PC games.